across separate timelines. Through 10,000 years of history, one name echoes through legend: Link. But here's what most don't realize. There isn't just one Link. There are 12 different heroes, each living in different eras, each facing their own version of an ancient evil, each carrying the same heroic spirit, reborn again and again. From the floating islands of Skyloft to the post-apocalyptic wilds of modern Hyrule, this is the complete chronicle of how one curse created a dozen legends. Our journey begins not on the surface world, but high above the clouds on the floating island of Skyloft, around 2,000 years before the events of Ocarina of Time would unfold. This is where we meet the first Link in the chronological timeline, though not the first we encountered in real life. The hero of the skies stands as perhaps the most crucial link in the entire franchise, for his actions would echo across every timeline that followed, shaping the very nature of heroism itself. Born and raised among the clouds, this 17-year-old aspiring knight had no knowledge of his true destiny. Like so many Links who would follow, his parents remain a mystery, absent from his story, yet somehow irrelevant to his purpose. The floating sanctuary of Skyloft served as humanity's refuge, hidden away from the surface world below by the goddess Hylia herself. Here, young Link trained as a knight of Skyloft, learning to soar through the skies on his crimson loftwing, mastering swordplay under the watchful eyes of his instructors, and forming bonds that would transcend lifetimes. The academy where Link studied was more than just a school. It was a place where young people learned to become protectors of their floating world. His classmates included Zelda, a girl whose radiant spirit seemed to illuminate every room she entered, though neither she nor Link understood the divine nature that burned within her soul. Their friendship was natural, unforced, built on shared laughter and quiet moments watching the sun set through the clouds. Yet even in these peaceful times, there were signs of the destiny that awaited them both. Link's life changed forever during the Wing Ceremony, an annual competition that tested the flying skills of Skyloft's youth. As he soared through the clouds on his crimson loftwing, chasing the ceremonial bird that carried the goddess statue, everything seemed perfect, until a mysterious tornado, summoned by forces he couldn't comprehend, tore through the sky like a wound in reality itself. The dark funnel cloud seized Zelda with impossible malice, ripping her from her loftwing's back and casting her down to the forbidden surface below. But Zelda was more than just a friend, more than just another student at the academy. She was the mortal incarnation of the goddess Hylia herself, though neither she nor Link understood this truth at first. Their connection ran deeper than memory, deeper than consciousness, a bond forged by divine purpose and destiny that stretched back to the very creation of the world. The tornado that claimed her was no natural phenomenon, but the deliberate act of Girahim, the self-proclaimed demon lord, who served an even darker master. In the aftermath of Zelda's disappearance, Link's world transformed from peaceful academy life to desperate quest. The surface world that he discovered when he finally descended through the clouds was vast and dangerous, populated by monsters that had never known the gentle touch of civilization. Ancient forests whispered, with mysteries older than memory. Deserts stretched endlessly under alien skies, and volcanic regions pulsed with primal energies that spoke of the world's violent birth. Guided by the spirit of the sword, Fi, a being of pure logic and dedication created by the goddess Hylia herself. Link's simple blade gradually evolved from a modest goddess sword into the legendary Master Sword, through trials that tested not just his courage, but his compassion, wisdom, and power. Each sacred flame he kindled in the ancient temples strengthened both the blade and his own spirit, preparing him for a confrontation that would determine the fate of all future generations. The temples Link explored were more than mere dungeons. They were shrines to different aspects of divine power, each one teaching him essential lessons about the nature of heroism. In the Skyview Temple, he learned that courage meant pressing forward despite fear and uncertainty. The Earth Temple taught him that strength must be tempered with humility. The Lanairu mining facility revealed that wisdom could transcend time itself, showing him glimpses of past and future that helped him understand his place in the grand design. As Link gathered the sacred flames and strengthened his blade, he also gathered allies whose support would prove crucial in the battles ahead. The Kikwi tribe taught him that even the smallest beings could show great courage when their homes were threatened. The Mogma. People demonstrated that knowledge and bravery could coexist, that understanding one's enemy was as important as having the strength to defeat them. The ancient robots of Lanairu showed him that dedication to duty could transcend even death itself. But it was the Gorons of Eldin who perhaps taught him the most valuable lesson of all, that heroism was not a solitary path. When the tribe elder, recognizing Link's pure heart and noble purpose, allowed him to enter the sacred fire sanctuary, it marked Link's acceptance not just as a hero, but as a member of the greater community of all living beings. The bonds he forged with these people would strengthen his spirit more than any sacred flame ever could. The revelation of his true purpose came gradually, like dawn breaking over the clouds of Skyloft. Fi's explanations, combined with his own growing understanding, revealed that he was not just any hero. He was the reincarnation of the first hero who had served the goddess Hylia in ages past. The spirit of courage that burned within him had chosen countless champions throughout history, but his was a special case, a direct spiritual descendant of the original chosen one. Demise, the source of all evil, represented something far more terrifying than any monster Link had previously faced. This was not merely a powerful enemy or a corrupted being seeking dominion. This was the primordial darkness that had existed since the beginning of time, the eternal opposite of all that was good and light in the world. Their battle would be more than physical combat. It would be cosmic, mythic, the clash between order and chaos given form and substance. The final confrontation took place in a realm beyond normal space and time, where the very nature of reality could be shaped by will and determination. Here, Demise appeared in his true form, not as the beast Girahim had tried to resurrect, but as the perfect dark mirror of heroism itself. He wielded power that could reshape mountains, commanded lightning that could split the sky, and possessed a malice so pure that it could corrupt the very air around him. Link's victory came not through superior strength or magical power, but through the purity of his purpose and the strength of the bonds he had forged. The Master Sword, now fully awakened and singing with divine energy, became the perfect expression of his heroic spirit. When he struck the killing blow against Demise, it was not Link alone who triumphed, but every person he had helped, every friend he had made, every moment of courage he had shown throughout his journey. Yet even in defeat, Demise managed to plant the seeds of future conflict. His dying curse would echo through eternity. My hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again. These words established the eternal struggle between Link, Zelda, and Ganon that would define every game that followed. The curse ensured that evil would return in new forms, requiring new heroes to rise and meet each fresh incarnation of ancient malice. But Demise's curse also contained an unintended promise that just as evil would return, so too would heroism. The spirit of the first hero, proven and strengthened through Link's trials, would be reborn whenever darkness threatened to overwhelm the light. The goddess Hylia's love and Link's courage had created something more powerful than any curse, the eternal guarantee that hope would never truly die. The hero of the skies achieved something unprecedented in the annals of heroism. He ended the age of gods walking openly among mortals and began the age of mortal heroes. By forging the Master Sword and sealing Demise, he created both the tools and the necessity for future champions. His spirit, blessed by Hylia and tempered by divine trials, became the template for every Link who would follow. When he and Zelda chose to remain on the surface and found the kingdom of Hyrule, they planted the seeds of every adventure to come. Their descendants would rule the growing kingdom with wisdom and justice, while the spirit of their love and courage would be reborn in new heroes whenever the need arose. The floating island of Skyloft would fade into legend, but the lessons learned in its academy and the bonds forged in its sacred halls would echo through every subsequent age. The Master Sword, infused with Fi's consciousness and Link's heroic spirit, would become the eternal test of worthiness for future heroes. Only those who possessed the same pure heart and unwavering courage as the hero of the skies would be able to draw the blade from its pedestal. In this way, Link's legacy became both a guide and a guardian for all the heroes who would follow in his footsteps. As the hero of the skies and the reborn goddess Hylia looked out over the surface world they had saved and would now call home, they carried within them the knowledge that their victory was both complete and just the beginning. Evil would return, as Demise had promised, but so would heroism. The cycle had been established, the pattern set, the legend begun. From this moment forward, the name Link would be synonymous with courage, hope, and the unwavering determination to protect all that was good in the world. The foundation had been laid. The Master Sword waited in its pedestal, ready to choose new champions. The kingdom of Hyrule spread its roots deep into the soil of the surface world, and somewhere in the eternal cycle of reincarnation, the spirit of the hero rested, gathering strength for the countless battles yet to come. Not every hero begins their journey with cosmic destiny weighing upon their shoulders. Sometimes heroism emerges from the simplest circumstances: a festival interrupted, a friend in danger, a tradition that must be upheld. In the early days of Hyrule's history, when the kingdom was still young and the surface world bore fresh scars from its divine founding, we encounter two Links whose adventures, while smaller in scope than the cosmic battles of their predecessor, proved no less significant in shaping the legend that would span millennia. The hero of the Minish, as fans have lovingly dubbed him, was merely 12 years old when fate came calling at his door. This was an age when most children spent their days learning simple trades, playing games in the village square, and dreaming of distant adventures they might never experience. But destiny, it seems, has little regard for the ordinary expectations of childhood. Living as the grandson of Smith the blacksmith in the bustling Hyrule town, this young Link enjoyed what should have been a peaceful childhood, learning the ancient art of metalwork while maintaining a cherished friendship with Princess Zelda herself. The relationship between this Link and Zelda was beautifully innocent, unmarked by the weight of destiny or the shadow of future tragedy. They were simply children who enjoyed each other's company, who shared secrets and laughter in the way that only true friends can. Zelda would often escape the formal protocols of castle life to visit the blacksmith's shop, where she could watch Link learn his craft and listen to Smith's stories of ancient legends and forgotten lore. These moments of simple friendship would prove more precious than either child could have imagined. The annual Pickery Festival should have been just another celebration, a time when the people of Hyrule gathered to honor the tiny Pickery people who, according to legend, brought good fortune to the land and left helpful gifts for deserving humans. The festival was particularly special for children, as it was said that only they possessed the pure hearts necessary to see the Pickery in their true forms. Adults could sense their presence, perhaps catch glimpses of movement in their peripheral vision, but the full wonder of the Pickery realm was reserved for those who had not yet lost the magic of childhood innocence. Instead of joy and celebration, the festival became the stage for catastrophe, when Vati, a Pickery who had been corrupted by his exposure to the dark hearts of men, emerged to shatter the sacred Pickery blade and turn Princess Zelda to stone. The transformation was instantaneous and terrible. One moment she was laughing beside Link at the festival games, and the next she was frozen in cold marble, her expression locked in a moment of surprise and fear that would haunt Link's dreams for months to come. The Pickery blade's destruction was more than mere vandalism. It was an assault on the very foundations of peace itself. The blade had been used to seal away the dark creatures that once plagued the world, and its breaking released these monsters back into Hyrule. Suddenly, the kingdom that had known relative peace since its founding found itself under siege by shadows that crept through the night and beasts that emerged from the deepest, darkest places of the world. King Daltus, faced with his daughter's petrification and the return of ancient evils, turned to the only hope available. The legends spoke of the Pickery, and if they were real, perhaps they could provide the solution to both crises. Smith, being the most skilled craftsman in the kingdom and the keeper of ancient knowledge about the sacred blade, was the obvious choice to attempt its reforging. But Smith was old, his hands no longer as steady as they once were, and the task would require someone with both skill and the pure heart, necessary to see and communicate with the Pickery themselves. Link's journey into the world of the Pickery was one of discovery and wonder that expanded his understanding of heroism in ways no training could have provided. The first time he shrank down to Picori size, the familiar world of Hyrule transformed into something magical and strange. Blades of grass became towering trees, puddles became vast lakes, and everyday objects took on entirely new purposes and possibilities. A simple jar could become a hiding place, a book could serve as a bridge, and a tiny crack in the wall could lead to entire secret kingdoms. The Picori themselves were revealed to be far more complex than the simple, helpful spirits of legend. Their society was ancient and sophisticated, with its own politics, traditions, and internal conflicts. Some Picori had grown distant from humans over the centuries, viewing them as clumsy giants who had forgotten the proper ways of living in harmony with the natural world. Others maintained the old traditions of assistance and friendship, leaving gifts and performing small acts of kindness that humans often attributed to luck or coincidence. Link's small stature in the Picori world forced him to approach problems differently than any hero before him. He could not rely on strength or traditional weapons. Instead, he had to use his wit, his compassion, and his ability to see the world from multiple perspectives. When faced with a gap too wide to cross, he learned to use the wind from a passing butterfly's wings to carry him across. When confronted by creatures that seemed threatening, he discovered that most of them were simply misunderstood, acting out of fear or confusion rather than malice. The bonds he forged with individual Picori taught him lessons that would resonate throughout his adventure and beyond. Elder Library, the keeper of ancient knowledge, showed him that wisdom was not about knowing everything, but about understanding how to find the answers when they were needed. Festery, the Picori who had dedicated his life to crafting beautiful objects, demonstrated that true artistry came from creating things that brought joy to others rather than glory to oneself. Malari, the mountain-dwelling Picori, who had mastered the art of metalworking, revealed that strength and gentleness could coexist in the same heart. Perhaps most importantly, Link learned about the true nature of the connection between the Picori and human worlds. The barriers between them were not absolute. They were maintained by mutual agreement and respect. Humans had once worked closely with the Picori, but as civilization grew more complex and adults became consumed with larger concerns, the partnership had faded into legend. Only children, with their natural openness and wonder, could still bridge that gap easily. The elements Link gathered to reforge the Picori blade were more than mere materials. They were symbols of the virtues necessary for true heroism. Earth, representing stability and endurance. Fire, symbolizing passion and determination. Water, embodying adaptability and the power to heal. Wind, showing that sometimes the gentlest touch could accomplish what force could not. Each element had to be earned through acts of kindness, bravery, and wisdom, rather than simply taken by force. Vati's corruption became more understandable as Link learned more about the Wind Mage's origins. Once, Vati had been a Picori like any other, curious about the human world, but content with his place in Picori society. His transformation began when he discovered a magical cap that granted the power to fulfill wishes, but only for others, never for the wearer. The constant exposure to human desires, to the darker wishes that people kept hidden in their hearts, had gradually poisoned Vati's own spirit until he became consumed with the desire for power and recognition. The cap itself represented the dangerous, seductive nature of power without responsibility. Vati had begun using it with good intentions, genuinely wanting to help humans by granting their wishes. But the more he used it, the more he began to understand the selfish, petty, and sometimes cruel desires that lurked in human hearts. His growing cynicism and disappointment had twisted into hatred, and his power had grown beyond his ability to control it wisely. When Link finally confronted Vati in the Wind Mage's true form, a massive, terrible being of pure, magical energy, it was not hatred that drove him forward, but compassion. He understood that Vati was as much a victim as a villain, corrupted by forces he had never been equipped to handle. The battle was fierce and dangerous, with Vati commanding winds that could slice through stone and lightning that could level buildings. But Link's greatest weapon was his refusal to surrender his own compassion to the demands of combat. The Four-Sword, as the reforged Pickery blade came to be known, embodied everything Link had learned during his journey. It was not just a weapon, but a symbol of balance. The harmony between human and Pickery worlds, between strength and gentleness, between the power to destroy and the wisdom to protect. When he used it to defeat Vati, the blade's power split the evil from the Pickery, allowing Vati's original uncorrupted spirit to find peace while ensuring that the destructive force he had become could never harm anyone again. Princess Zelda's restoration from her stone prison was more than just the reversal of a curse. It was a renewal of the bond between the royal family and the ancient protectors of Hyrule. She awoke with dim memories of her time as stone, recalling strange dreams where she had sensed the Pickery moving around her, working tirelessly to find a way to break Vati's spell. This experience had given her a deeper appreciation for the unseen forces that worked to protect the kingdom and its people. Years later, when another Link would take up the Four-Sword, the lessons learned by the hero of the Minish would prove their enduring value. The hero of Four, as this later Link came to be known, faced a simpler story in its telling, but one that built directly upon the foundation his predecessor had laid. When Princess Zelda was kidnapped during what should have been a peaceful visit to the Four Swords' resting place, this new Link demonstrated that sometimes the greatest courage lay in accepting help, even from yourself. The Four Swords' power to split one hero into four was no accident. It represented the truth that no hero stands truly alone. Every Link carried within himself the potential for multiple approaches, multiple solutions, multiple ways of being brave. The Red Link might charge forward with passionate determination. The Blue Link might approach problems with cool logic. The Green Link might seek the balanced path between extremes. And the Purple Link might find creative solutions that none of the others had considered. This multiplication of heroism was particularly fitting for an era when evil itself was becoming more complex and multifaceted. Vati's return in this later adventure was not simply a repetition of his previous defeat. He had learned from his failures and adapted his methods. The challenges he presented required not just one hero with one approach, but multiple heroes working in coordination, each bringing their own strengths to bear on different aspects of the same larger problem. The cooperation required between the four Links served as a metaphor for the broader cooperation needed in any heroic endeavor. No matter how skilled or determined an individual hero might be, there were always challenges that required teamwork, problems that could only be solved through the combination of different perspectives and abilities. The Four Sword Adventures established this principle as a cornerstone of heroic tradition in Hyrule. These early Links, the hero of the Minish and the hero of Four, established important precedents that would echo through every subsequent adventure. They proved that heroes could be young, that age was no barrier to courage when it was truly needed. They demonstrated that magic was to be respected rather than feared, that the supernatural elements of the world were potential allies rather than automatic threats. Most importantly, they showed that the bonds between Link and Zelda were deeper than mere friendship or duty. They were connections that transcended individual lifetimes and personal identities. They also introduced the concept that would become central to the entire franchise, that evil, once defeated, rarely stayed buried forever. Vati's multiple returns across these games showed that corruption had a way of seeping back into the world, requiring constant vigilance and new heroes, ready to rise when the old threats emerged in new forms. This cycle of return and renewal would become one of the defining characteristics of the Link legend. Perhaps most significantly, the hero of the Minish and the hero of 4 proved that heroism began with simple acts of kindness and grew through steadfast determination. They were children who became legends, not because destiny demanded it with cosmic force, but because they chose to help others when help was needed most. Their adventures showed that the greatest heroes were often those who started with the smallest steps, who learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what was right despite being afraid. In the grand tapestry of the Link legend, these early heroes served as the bridge between the cosmic heroism of the hero of the skies and the more complex challenges that would face later Links. They established that heroism was not just about facing ultimate evil or cosmic threats. It was also about protecting communities, preserving traditions, and maintaining the connections between different peoples and different worlds. Their legacy would prove that sometimes the smallest heroes cast the longest shadows, and that the most important victories were often the ones that ensured other, greater heroes would have the chance to rise when the truly dark times came. Among all the Links throughout history, none carries a greater burden of legend than the hero of time. His story begins in tragedy. A Hylian baby delivered to the Kokiri forest during the chaos of a civil war that tore through Hyrule like a wound that would not heal. His mother, dying from wounds sustained in her desperate flight through war-torn countryside, entrusted her infant son to the great Deku tree, the forest's ancient guardian spirit, with her final breath. Her last words spoke not of her own pain, but of her hope that her child might find safety in the eternal peace of the forest. His father, according to scattered references throughout the series and the whispered memories of those who survived the conflict, was likely a knight of Hyrule who fell defending the kingdom in that same brutal civil war. The Hyrulean Civil War was a conflict that scarred the land for generations, brother fighting brother over questions of succession and power that seemed desperately important at the time, but would fade to meaninglessness in the face of the greater darkness that was already stirring in the shadows. The war's end brought peace, but it was the hollow peace of exhaustion, rather than the true peace of resolution. Raised among the Kokiri, eternal children of the forest who knew neither age nor death, Link grew up believing himself to be one of them, despite never having a fairy companion like his forest siblings. The great Deku tree protected this secret with gentle lies and careful misdirection, understanding that the boy would need the innocence and wonder of childhood to balance the weight of destiny that awaited him, like a shadow growing longer with each passing year. The Deku tree had seen the future in dreams and visions, had glimpsed the trials that would test this child's spirit, and knew that only a heart unmarked by early cynicism could hope to endure what was coming. For 10 years, Link lived this peaceful lie, learning the ways of the forest from Saria and the other Kokiri children, forming bonds with creatures both magical and mundane, developing the pure heart that would make him worthy of the Master Sword when the time came. He learned to move through the forest like a whisper, to understand, though, language of plants and animals, to find joy in simple things like the way sunlight filtered through leaves or the sound of wind chimes made from hollow reeds. These lessons in wonder and appreciation would prove as valuable as any combat training in the trials ahead. The forest was more than just his home. It was his teacher. Every glade held lessons about balance and harmony. Every stream taught him about persistence and adaptation. Every ancient tree demonstrated the strength that came from deep roots and patient growth. The lost woods surrounding the Kokiri forest were filled with secrets and dangers, but they also contained wisdom. For those patient enough to listen and humble enough to learn. Link's childhood adventures in these mystical depths prepared him for the larger mysteries he would encounter in the wider world. When Navi the fairy finally came to him, her arrival marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. The great Deku tree's summons was both a call to destiny and a goodbye to innocence, though Link could not yet understand the full weight of either. The ancient guardian's explanation of Link's true nature and purpose was delivered with the gentle wisdom of a grandfather breaking difficult news to a beloved child. Necessary, inevitable, but delivered with all the love and care that could soften such a revelation. The Deku tree's curse at the hands of Goma represented more than just the suffering of one forest guardian. It symbolized the spreading corruption that threatened all life in Hyrule. Queen Goma's parasitic presence within the tree's body was a perfect metaphor for how evil worked, not through dramatic announcements or obvious attacks, but by infiltrating and corrupting from within, turning strength into weakness and wisdom into suffering. Link's first real battle taught him that heroism often meant facing horrors that hid behind familiar faces. When the hero of time drew the Master Sword at the age of 10, the blade's power immediately transported him 7 years into the future. A future where Ganondorf had conquered Hyrule and plunged the land into darkness so complete that even the sun seemed dimmed by despair. This temporal displacement would define not just his adventure, but the very nature of the Zelda timeline itself. The boy who had fallen asleep in a world of relative peace awakened as a young man in a world where hope had become a precious and rare commodity. The Temple of Time, where the Master Sword rested, existed outside normal temporal flow, serving as a bridge between past and future, between the innocence of childhood and the responsibility of adulthood. The 7 years that passed while Link slept were years of increasing darkness for Hyrule as Ganondorf's power grew unchecked and his influence spread like a plague across the land. Villages were abandoned, forests withered, mountains cracked, and the very spirit of the kingdom seemed to die a little more each day. As an adult, Link possessed the knowledge of a child, but the strength of a man, creating a unique perspective that allowed him to see solutions others missed. His innocence had been preserved by his magical sleep, protecting him from the gradual corruption and despair that had worn down the spirits of those who had lived through Ganondorf's rise. This combination of childlike wonder and adult capability made him uniquely suited to inspire hope in others and to approach seemingly impossible challenges with creative optimism. His adventures as both child and adult demonstrated the full scope of what a hero could become. As a child, he showed that courage came from innocence and determination, that the pure desire to help others could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. His early quests to gather the spiritual stones taught him about different forms of strength and wisdom, each guardian race offering their own understanding of what it meant to be truly powerful. The Gorons taught him that true strength was protective rather than destructive, that the mightiest warriors were those who used their power to shield others rather than to dominate them. Darunia's friendship showed Link that leadership was about service, that those in power had a responsibility to care for those who depended on them. The rolling techniques and fire resistance he learned from the Gorons would serve him well in future trials, but the lessons about community and mutual support were even more valuable. Princess Ruto and the Zoras demonstrated that wisdom could take many forms, that understanding the flow of water and the currents of change was as important as any book learning. The Zora's domain, with its perfect harmony between architecture and nature, showed Link what civilization could achieve when it worked with natural forces rather than against them. Ruto's own journey from spoiled princess to wise ruler paralleled Link's growth from forest child to legendary hero. As an adult, he proved that wisdom must temper strength, that true heroism required not just the power to destroy evil, but the discernment to know when and how to use that power. The temples he conquered and the sages he awakened each taught him different aspects of heroism that no single teacher could have provided. These were not just obstacles to overcome, but classrooms where the curriculum was nothing less than the complete education of a legendary hero. Saria, his oldest friend from the forest, became the forest sage and taught him about the importance of friendship and memory. Her acceptance of her new role, despite the pain of growing apart from Link, showed him that true love sometimes meant letting go, that the deepest connections could survive even the most fundamental changes. The forest temple's trials forced Link to confront twisted versions of familiar places and faces, teaching him that evil often worked by corrupting what was good rather than by creating something entirely new. Darunia's son, who took his father's name upon reaching adulthood, became the Fire Sage and demonstrated the importance of honor and tradition. The Fire Temple's challenges required Link to master not just combat and puzzle solving, but patience and respect for the ancient ways. The Goron culture's emphasis on brotherhood and mutual support provided a model for the kind of community that could resist evil through unity and shared purpose. Princess Ruto, despite her complicated feelings about Link's adult form and their childhood engagement, accepted her destiny as the Water Sage and proved that duty could coexist with personal disappointment. The Water Temple's intricate puzzles taught Link that some problems required careful planning and systematic thinking rather than bold action. The temple's emphasis on changing water levels served as a metaphor for the way circumstances could shift, requiring heroes to adapt their strategies while maintaining their core principles. Impa, revealed as the Shadow Sage, taught Link about the weight of duty and sacrifice. The bottom of the well and the Shadow Temple showed him the darkest aspects of Hyrule's history, the violence and cruelty that had been hidden beneath the kingdom's civilized surface. These trials forced Link to confront the reality that heroism often meant facing truths that others preferred to ignore, that protecting innocence sometimes required experiencing things that could destroy one's own innocence. Nabooru, the Gerudo warrior who became the spirit sage, proved that even enemies could become allies when they shared common goals. The Spirit Temple's trials, split between past and future, taught Link that heroism was about more than individual actions. It was about building connections across time that could outlast any single person's life. Naburu's willingness to oppose her own king for the sake of justice showed Link that true loyalty was to principles rather than to people or institutions. Rauru, the light sage who had been waiting in the Temple of Time throughout Link's adventure, illuminated the responsibility that came with power. His guidance helped Link understand that being chosen for a great destiny was not a privilege but a burden, that having the ability to save the world meant having the obligation to do so regardless of personal cost. Rauru's patient wisdom provided the foundation that allowed all the other sages' teachings to come together into a coherent understanding of heroism. The final confrontation with Ganondorf showcased every aspect of Link's growth throughout his adventure. The battle began in Ganondorf's tower with swordplay and magic, a contest between the king of thieves and the hero of legend that tested everything Link had learned about combat and strategy. But it was Link's refusal to abandon his friends, rushing to save Zelda when the tower began to collapse around them, that demonstrated his true character had remained unchanged despite all his trials. When Ganondorf, transformed into the beast Ganon after the tower's destruction, Link faced not just a powerful enemy, but the manifestation of pure malice itself. This was Ganondorf's true nature revealed, stripped of all pretense and political cunning, reduced to the essential core of hatred and destruction that had always driven him. The battle in the ruined courtyard, surrounded by the debris of Ganondorf's tower, represented the ultimate test of everything Link had become. His victory came through the combination of all his tools and allies working in perfect harmony. The Master Sword, empowered by the prayers and hopes of the awakened sages, became more than just a weapon. It became the physical manifestation of Hyrule's collective will to survive and thrive. The light arrows provided by Princess Zelda represented the power of wisdom, joining with courage to overcome the darkness that raw strength alone could never defeat. Most importantly, the unbreakable bond between the three bearers of the Triforce, Link's courage, Zelda's wisdom, and even Ganondorf's power, created a connection that transcended their individual conflicts. But victory came with an impossible choice that would haunt Link for the rest of his days. Princess Zelda, using the power of the Triforce of Wisdom and moved by compassion for the hero who had sacrificed his childhood to save her kingdom, offered to send Link back to his boyhood. This would allow him to reclaim the 7 years stolen by his heroic destiny, to experience the youth and innocence that had been taken from him by the demands of fate. This act of compassion created the timeline split that defines the Zelda universe. Though neither Zelda nor Link could have understood the cosmic implications of their choice at the time, the adult timeline would continue forward from their victory, creating a Hyrule recovering from Ganondorf's reign, but forever changed by the experience. The child timeline would branch backward, allowing Link to return with knowledge of future events and the opportunity to prevent the tragedy before it began. Zelda's offer was motivated by pure love and gratitude, a recognition that Link had given up everything that should have mattered to a young person: friends, family, the simple joys of growing up, in order to save a world that had never asked for his sacrifice. Her wisdom told her that justice demanded Link be given the chance to live the life that had been stolen from him, even if it meant creating paradoxes that might echo through eternity. Link's acceptance of this offer was perhaps the most heroic act of his entire adventure. It would have been understandable for him to refuse, to claim the glory and recognition that his deeds had earned, to remain in the timeline where he was celebrated as the legendary savior of Hyrule. Instead, he chose to trust that others could carry on the work of protecting the world, that his sacrifice had been meaningful even if it would be forgotten, that true heroism meant being willing to let go of personal glory when greater good demanded it. In the child timeline, Link's warnings led to Ganondorf's capture and attempted execution, but this created new problems that no one could have anticipated. The execution was botched when the Triforce of Power protected Ganondorf from the Sage's blade, and in desperation, the ancient sages banished him to the Twilight Realm instead of finding a way to properly destroy him. This decision would have consequences that would echo through generations, creating new forms of evil that future heroes would have to face. Meanwhile, Link himself, displaced in time and burdened with memories of heroic deeds that now never happened, began a journey that would lead him to the land of Termina and the adventure chronicled in Majora's Mask. The psychological toll of his temporal displacement was immense. He remembered being a celebrated hero, but in this timeline, those deeds had never occurred. He remembered friends and allies who no longer knew him, victories that had been erased, sacrifices that had been rendered meaningless. Termina presented Link with perhaps his greatest challenge yet, a 3-day cycle that repeated endlessly, trapping an entire world in temporal prison and slowly destroying it through repetition and despair. The land itself was a reflection of Link's own displaced nature, caught between times, unable to move forward or return to what was, slowly dying from the weight of an impossible situation. Here, the hero of time's greatest tool wasn't his sword or his shield. It was his ability to remember across time loops, to build relationships and gather knowledge through repetition, while others remained trapped in ignorance of their situation. The Song of Time, which allowed him to reset the cycle, became both his salvation and his curse, giving him the power to prevent disaster while condemning him to experience the same losses over and over again. The Skull Kid wearing Majora's Mask represented Link's own displaced nature in many ways, a being removed from its proper time and place, acting out in destructive ways because it could no longer find its proper role in the world. The transformation masks that Link collected throughout his adventure allowed him to experience different perspectives on the same tragic situation, literally walking in other people's footsteps to understand their pain and find ways to help them. Link's ultimate triumph over Majora required him to understand that saving the world sometimes meant saving individuals, that the grand heroic gesture was meaningless without the countless small acts of kindness that made life worth living. Every side quest, every small favor, Every moment spent helping the people of Termina contributed to his final victory, not through mechanical necessity, but through spiritual truth. A hero who could not care for individuals could never truly save the world. The festival that concluded his adventure in Termina was both an ending and a beginning, a celebration of life and friendship that proved some things were worth preserving regardless of the cost. When he prevented the moon from falling and freed the Skull Kid from Majora's influence, he demonstrated that a hero's greatest power wasn't the ability to destroy evil, but the capacity to heal and redeem what evil had corrupted. The hero of Time's legacy extends far beyond his own adventures, reaching across timelines and generations to influence every hero who would follow. His bloodline continued through the child timeline, eventually producing the hero of Twilight centuries later. His techniques and teachings were preserved and passed down through generations of knights and warriors, becoming the foundation of Hyrule's military tradition. Most importantly, his spirit, having experienced the ultimate responsibility and made the ultimate sacrifice, became the template for every hero who would follow in his footsteps. In the adult timeline, his legend inspired others to rise when new threats emerged, proving that heroism could transcend individual heroes and become a shared cultural value. The stories of his deeds gave hope to those facing impossible odds and provided a model of selfless service that influenced kings and commoners alike. Even when the details of his adventures faded into myth, the essential truth of his heroism, that one person with pure intentions could change the world, remained to inspire future generations. In the child timeline, his example shaped a kingdom's understanding of what heroism truly meant, influencing everything from military training to royal policy, to the way ordinary citizens thought about their obligations to each other. The knowledge he brought back from the future allowed Hyrule to avoid some catastrophes, while inadvertently creating others, proving that even the most well-intentioned actions could have unforeseeable consequences. Yet, perhaps, the hero of Time's greatest achievement was proving that heroism isn't about individual glory or personal power, but about service to something larger than oneself. When given the chance to reclaim his stolen childhood, he took it, not out of selfishness, but out of trust that others could carry on the work of protecting the world. His willingness to let go of his status as the celebrated savior of Hyrule showed that true heroes understand when their time has passed and new heroes must rise to meet new challenges. The Master Sword, having been wielded by the hero of Time in his moment of greatest triumph, carried within its blessed steel the memory of what true heroism looked like. Future heroes who proved worthy of the blade would feel the echo of his courage and determination, drawing strength from the knowledge that others had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious through faith, friendship, and unwavering dedication to protecting the innocent. In the end, the hero of Time's story became more than just one hero's adventure. It became the defining myth of what heroism could accomplish, the proof that even in the darkest times, when evil seemed insurmountable and hope appeared lost, one person with the courage to act could change everything. His legacy lived on not in monuments or statues, but in the countless small acts of courage performed by ordinary people who remembered that heroes were not born but made. One choice at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one moment of standing up for what was right at a time. The hero of Time's victory created three possibilities, three different paths through which destiny could unfold, each representing not just different events, but different philosophies about heroism, legacy, and the nature of good and evil itself. When Princess Zelda used the power of the Triforce of Wisdom to send Link back to his childhood, she unknowingly fractured time itself, creating parallel streams of history that would each develop their own understanding of what it meant to be a hero. These three timelines, the adult timeline where Link vanished, the child timeline where he returned with foreknowledge, and the dark possibility where he failed entirely, would each produce their own legends, their own heroes, and their own definitions of courage. In the adult timeline, Link's disappearance after defeating Ganon left Hyrule without its legendary hero just when the kingdom needed him most. The immediate aftermath of Ganondorf's defeat brought celebration and relief, but as years passed and turned into decades, then decades into centuries, the absence of the hero of time began to weigh heavily on the collective consciousness of Hyrule. The kingdom rebuilt itself around the memory of a hero who had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, creating shrines and monuments to a savior who existed more in legend than in living memory. The people of this timeline developed a particular understanding of heroism based on absence and longing. Songs were sung about the hero of time's deeds, stories were told of his courage and sacrifice, but always with the underlying sadness that he was gone, that he had chosen to leave them, rather than stay and guide them through the challenges that followed his victory. This created a culture that viewed heroism as inherently tragic, beautiful, but temporary, destined to burn brightly and then fade away, leaving only memory and hope behind. When Ganon eventually broke free from his seal, for evil has a way of finding cracks in even the strongest prisons, no destined hero emerged to stop him. The people waited for Link's return, watching the horizons and listening for the sound of hoofbeats that might herald the arrival of their legendary savior. But Link was gone, existing in a different timeline entirely, and their faith in his return proved as empty as their prayers for deliverance. The kingdom's defenders fought bravely, but they were mortal men and women facing a force of supernatural malice, and their courage, while admirable, was not enough to prevail against such overwhelming darkness. In desperation, as Ganon's power grew unchecked and his corruption spread across the land, like a plague that turned beauty into horror, the gods themselves were forced to intervene. The decision to flood Hyrule was not made lightly. It represented the ultimate acknowledgement that some evils are too great for mortal heroes to overcome, that sometimes salvation requires destroying what you love in order to save what can be saved. The great deluge that sealed Ganon beneath the waves also sealed away the entire civilization that the hero of time had died to protect. The survivors fled to mountaintops that became islands, creating a new world where Hyrule existed only in legend and memory, preserved beneath the ocean like a beautiful dream that could be glimpsed but never fully reclaimed. This was the world that the hero of winds inherited, a place where the very concept of heroism had been lost to time, where the old legends seemed as distant and impossible as fairy tales told to children who no longer believed in magic. The hero of winds, Link of Outset Island, began his adventure not from destiny, but from love, proving that heroism could emerge from the simplest and most human of motivations. When his sister Hyrule was kidnapped by the massive bird known as the Helmarock King, this young boy took up a sword, not because prophecy demanded it, or because ancient bloodlines called to him, but because family mattered more than fear. His initial quest was beautifully small in scope: rescue his sister, nothing more. But it would grow into something that reshaped the very understanding of what heroes could accomplish. His Hyrule existed beneath the ocean, preserved in time, but cut off from the living world above. A kingdom of memory and regret, where the past weighed so heavily that it threatened to drag down anyone who tried to reclaim it. When he finally descended beneath the waves and walked through the halls of Hyrule Castle, he was walking through a museum of heroism, a place where the deeds of the hero of time had been frozen in eternal monument, but stripped of all life and relevance to the present moment. The King of Red Lions, revealed to be the ancient king Daphne's Nohansen Hyrule, represented the weight of tradition and the burden of trying to restore what had been lost. His initial plan was simple in its tragedy: use the Hero of Winds to gather the Triforce, restore the sunken kingdom to the surface, and return Hyrule to its former glory. But this plan was based on the assumption that the past could be reclaimed unchanged, that heroism meant restoration rather than innovation, that the greatest good lay in returning to what had been rather than building something new. The Hero of Winds challenged this assumption through every aspect of his adventure. His methods were different from those of the Hero of Time, where his predecessor had been solemn and burdened by destiny. The Hero of Winds approached his quest with joy and curiosity, finding wonder in discovery rather than weight in responsibility. His companions were not ancient sages, but living friends. His sister Hyrule, whose capture had started his journey. Tetra, the pirate captain who proved to be Princess Zelda reborn. Medley and Makar, who became sages not through ancient bloodlines, but through personal choice and courage. When King Daphnes made his final wish upon the completed Triforce, he chose to wash away the old Hyrule forever rather than restore it, recognizing that some legacies are too heavy for the present to bear, and that true wisdom sometimes means letting go of what was in order to allow what could be to emerge. His wish freed not just his kingdom, but the very concept of heroism from the weight of legend, allowing future heroes to be ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things rather than legendary figures bound by ancient prophecies. The Hero of Winds didn't restore the old Hyrule. He helped birth a new world, where heroes could be pirates and train conductors, where adventure could be joyful rather than tragic, where saving the world could be an act of friendship rather than solitary destiny. His victory established that heroism was not bound by tradition or bloodline, that courage could emerge from anyone willing to stand up for what they loved, regardless of their background or the expectations placed upon them. His descendant, the Hero of Trains, inherited this new understanding of heroism and took it even further. In New Hyrule, Link was literally a train engineer, a working man with a practical job who happened to also be brave enough to save the world when circumstances required it. His adventure alongside Princess Zelda's spirit showed that heroism could be a partnership, that saving the world could be a collaborative effort where different people brought different strengths to bear on the same challenges. The spirit tracks that connected the various regions of New Hyrule served as both transportation network and metaphor for the new understanding of heroism that had emerged in this timeline. Unlike the solitary paths walked by previous heroes, these tracks connected communities, allowing people to support and assist each other, rather than facing their challenges alone. The hero of trains succeeded not through individual prowess, but through his ability to work with others, to understand their needs, and coordinate their efforts toward common goals. In the child timeline, the hero of time's warnings prevented Ganondorf's rise to power, but they couldn't prevent evil itself from finding new ways to manifest in the world. The sorcerer's failed execution and banishment to the Twilight Realm created a different kind of threat. Not the obvious menace of a conqueror seeking dominion, but the subtle corruption of shadows that worked by turning light against itself, by making the familiar strange and the comforting threatening. Years later, this corruption would spill back into the world of light in the form of the Twilight Invasion, requiring a new hero to face not just evil, but the very shadows of the past given malevolent form. The hero of Twilight emerged from Orden Village not as a destined champion, but as an ordinary ranch hand thrust into extraordinary circumstances, when his peaceful world was suddenly invaded by forces beyond his understanding. Unlike his legendary ancestor, this Link had no grand destiny calling to him from childhood. He was thrust into heroism when his village was attacked and his friends were captured by creatures of shadow and malice. The twilight that consumed Hyrule transformed him into a wolf, forcing him to experience the world from a completely different perspective, and teaching him that the line between civilization and wildness was thinner than most people wanted to admit. Midna, the Twilight Princess, became both his guide and his teacher in understanding this strange realm where light and shadow blended in ways that challenged every assumption about good and evil. Their relationship represented a new kind of heroic partnership, one built on mutual respect and gradual understanding rather than divine mandate or ancient prophecy. Through Midna, Link learned that the Twilight Realm wasn't inherently evil. It was simply different, and Ganondorf's corruption had twisted it into something monstrous that threatened both worlds. The wolf form that Link assumed in the Twilight taught him lessons that no human perspective could have provided. As a wolf, he could sense the connections between all living things, could track emotions and intentions through scent and instinct, could understand the natural world in ways that civilized thinking often obscured. These abilities made him a more complete hero, one who understood not just human concerns, but the broader web of life that connected all creatures and all realms. The hero of Twilight's greatest challenge wasn't defeating Ganondorf in single combat. It was learning to bridge two worlds that had grown apart through fear and misunderstanding. His wolf form allowed him to move between realms, to serve as a translator between different ways of being, to prove that light and shadow could coexist without one destroying the other. This understanding was crucial to his ultimate victory, as it allowed him to turn Ganondorf's own corruption against him. The final confrontation between the hero of Twilight and Ganondorf took place not in a grand temple or mystical realm, but on the plains of Hyrule Field, two warriors facing each other in honest combat without tricks or magic to tip the scales. This battle represented the culmination of everything Link had learned about balance and strength. Not the overwhelming power that sought to dominate, but the precise strength that sought to protect and preserve. His victory came with sacrifice that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Midna's destruction of the Mirror of Twilight severed the connection between the realms forever, protecting both worlds from future corruption, but ensuring that the understanding Link had gained about the nature of light and shadow would be his alone to carry. The hero of Twilight learned that sometimes being a hero meant accepting solitude and loss as the price of protecting others, that some victories could only be won by giving up what you valued most. The darkest timeline began with a simple but terrifying question. What if the hero of time had failed? What if, despite all his courage and preparation, despite the training and allies and magical tools, Ganondorf had proven too powerful in their final confrontation? This timeline explored the consequences of heroic failure and revealed what happened when evil was allowed to achieve complete victory, when the light that heroes represented was snuffed out and darkness ruled unchallenged. In this reality, Ganondorf killed Link during their final battle in his tower, claiming the complete Triforce and transforming into the beast Ganon with power beyond anything the world had ever seen. The sages managed to seal him in the sacred realm through desperate sacrifice, but their victory was incomplete and costly. Ganon's presence corrupted the sacred realm into the dark world, and his influence continued to poison Hyrule itself, even from behind the barriers that contained his physical form. The world that emerged from this catastrophe was scarred both physically and spiritually. Hyrule's people had learned that heroes could fail, that courage was not always enough, that even the most legendary champions could fall before the forces of evil. This knowledge created a different kind of culture, one that valued persistence over inspiration, one that understood that the fight against evil was a long, grinding struggle rather than a glorious adventure with guaranteed happy endings. Generations later, when the hero of Hyrule emerged from this scarred world, he represented a different model of heroism entirely. Living with his uncle in a Hyrule still bearing the wounds of ancient defeat, this Link grew up in a kingdom where heroism was measured not by grand gestures or cosmic destinies, but by the simple act of refusing to surrender to despair when surrender would have been the easier choice. When Aghanim, Ganon's alter ego working through magical manipulation rather than brute force, began kidnapping the descendants of the seven sages, this Link stepped forward not because he was destined to win, but because someone had to try. His heroism was born from necessity rather than destiny, from the understanding that waiting for a perfect hero meant allowing evil to triumph while good people suffered. His journey into the dark world revealed the true cost of evil's victory in ways that no history book could have conveyed. Every location he visited showed what Hyrule could become if darkness prevailed, not just destroyed, but corrupted, transformed into a twisted reflection of its former self, where everything beautiful had been turned into something hideous and threatening. The parallel between the light world and dark world served as a constant reminder that the stakes of heroism extended beyond simple victory or defeat to encompass the very nature of reality itself. The hero of Hyrule's greatest strength was his refusal to accept this corruption as permanent or inevitable. Armed with the Master Sword and eventually the power of the complete Triforce, he systematically restored both the dark world and its light counterpart, proving that even the most complete victories of evil could be reversed through determined effort and unwavering hope. His success demonstrated that heroism was not about being chosen by destiny, but about choosing to act when action was needed. This Link's adventures extended far beyond his initial victory over Ganon, showing that heroism was not a single moment of triumph, but a lifelong commitment to serving others. His journeys to distant lands in the Oracle Games revealed that evil was not confined to Hyrule, that the responsibility of heroism extended beyond familiar borders to encompass anyone who needed help anywhere in the world. In Koholint Island, during the adventure chronicled in Link's Awakening, he learned perhaps the most difficult lesson any hero can face, that sometimes saving others requires personal sacrifice that goes beyond physical danger to encompass the loss of beautiful illusions. The Windfish's dream had given the island's inhabitants their only existence, and awakening the divine creature meant ending that dream forever, condemning everyone he had met and helped to cease existing. His decision to complete the quest, despite this knowledge, showed that true heroism sometimes meant making choices that brought no personal satisfaction, that served the greater good even when that good was abstract and philosophical, rather than immediate and tangible. The hero of Hyrule proved that maturity in heroism meant understanding that not every problem had a solution that preserved everything valuable, that sometimes the best choice available was still a choice that required accepting loss. The original hero from the very first Zelda game represented the culmination of this timeline's long journey back from darkness and despair. When Princess Zelda's message reached him, carried by Impa, and delivered to a young swordsman who happened to be in the right place at the right time, he proved that heroism could emerge from the most unlikely sources and at the most unexpected moments. This Link was barely more than a child when he took up his sword, but he possessed something that no amount of training could provide: the simple determination to help someone in need. His youth was both a disadvantage and an advantage. He lacked experience and knowledge, but he also lacked the cynicism and despair that might have convinced an older person that the task was impossible. His sequel adventure in The Adventure of Link revealed additional depths to his character and to the nature of heroism itself. The quest to awaken the sleeping Zelda, a different princess from the one he had rescued in his first adventure, showed that heroes must sometimes heal the wounds of the past as well as fight the threats of the present. The existence of two Princess Zeldas at the timeline's end symbolized hope restored, the present saved, and the past redeemed. Each timeline's resolution demonstrated different aspects of heroic truth that together formed a complete understanding of what courage could accomplish. The adult timeline showed that heroism could transcend individual heroes and become a shared cultural value, that the spirit of courage could inspire entire civilizations to rise above their limitations and create new forms of beauty and justice in the world. The child timeline proved that heroes must sometimes accept the loneliness that comes with protecting others, that the deepest understanding often cannot be shared, that some victories require the hero to carry the weight of knowledge that others cannot bear. The hero of Twilight's isolation after Midna's departure represented this truth in its purest form, the understanding that some connections, no matter how meaningful, cannot survive the completion of the hero's task. The fallen timeline revealed that even when heroes fail, hope persists, that new heroes will rise to continue the fight no matter how complete evil's victory might seem. The long struggle back from Ganon's triumph showed that heroism was not about preventing all tragedies, but about refusing to let any tragedy be the final word in the story of good versus evil. These divergent paths would eventually find ways to influence each other across the barriers of time and possibility, but each had established its own understanding of what it meant to be a hero, what it meant to carry the spirit of courage, and what it meant to stand against the darkness, no matter the personal cost. The three timelines together formed a complete education in heroism, showing that courage could take many forms, that victory could be achieved through many different paths, and that the spirit of the hero was resilient enough to adapt to any circumstances while maintaining its essential character. The legacy of the hero of time lived on in all three timelines, but it manifested differently in each one according to the needs and understanding of the people who inherited his legend. In the adult timeline, he became a symbol of transcendence and hope. In the child timeline, he remained a teacher and guide whose wisdom shaped future generations. In the fallen timeline, he represented the truth that even failure could be overcome through persistence and renewed dedication to the cause of justice. Together, these three possibilities showed that heroism was larger than any single story, any single victory, or any single understanding of what courage meant. The hero of time's greatest achievement was not his victory over Ganondorf, but his creation of a legend flexible enough to inspire heroes of every kind, in every circumstance, facing every form of evil that the world could devise. His spirit lived on not in any single timeline, but in the eternal promise that whenever darkness threatened to overwhelm the light, somewhere, somehow, a hero would rise to meet the challenge. 10,000 years after the previous great calamity, Hyrule had entered a new age, where the very understanding of heroism had evolved beyond anything the ancient champions could have imagined. Technology and magic coexisted in ways that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations, creating a civilization that had learned to harness both the wisdom of the past and the innovation of the present. The Sheikah had developed mechanical wonders, divine beasts that towered over mountains and guardians that could move with spider-like grace across any terrain. Machines capable of combating threats on a scale previously reserved for legendary heroes, wielding blessed swords and divine artifacts. In this era of unprecedented innovation and relative peace, a new Link was born into a world that believed it had evolved beyond the need for traditional heroism. The ancient cycles of evil's return and heroic response had been studied, analyzed, and seemingly solved through careful preparation and technological advancement. Scholars had mapped the patterns of calamity's emergence. Engineers had built weapons to counter every conceivable threat, and the royal family had dedicated generations to preparing for the next inevitable crisis. The hero of the wild began his destined life not in obscurity like so many of his predecessors, but in the very heart of royal service, raised with full knowledge of his heritage and destiny from his earliest memories. Born to a knight of Hyrule, the first Link in the series whose father is explicitly referenced and even depicted in surviving concept art, he was raised with complete awareness of the expectations placed upon him. Unlike his predecessors, who stumbled into heroism through circumstances beyond their control, this Link trained from childhood to be Princess Zelda's appointed knight, her sword and shield against any threat that might emerge to challenge the kingdom's hard-won peace. His father's legacy weighed heavily upon him from the beginning. The Knights of Hyrule had maintained their traditions for countless generations, passing down not just combat techniques and tactical knowledge, but a deep understanding of what it meant to serve something greater than oneself. Link's childhood was spent learning not just how to wield a sword, but how to read the subtle signs of danger, how to anticipate threats before they fully manifested, how to place the safety of others above his own comfort or desires. But destiny proved more complex than either he or Princess Zelda had anticipated in their careful preparations. Princess Zelda herself carried a burden that paralleled his own, the expectation that she would awaken the sealing powers that had protected Hyrule for millennia. Powers that seemed to elude her despite years of training, desperate prayer, and increasingly frantic attempts to connect with the divine force that supposedly flowed through her bloodline. The relationship between this Link and Zelda was unlike any that had come before, built on duty that gradually transformed into genuine partnership, understanding, and ultimately a love deeper than either had expected. Their struggle wasn't just against external evil, but against the weight of expectations that threatened to crush them both, against the fear that they might prove inadequate to the destiny that had been thrust upon them before they were old enough to understand what it truly meant. Princess Zelda's research into the ancient technology revealed both the promise and the peril of their situation. The Sheikah had created wonders beyond imagination, shrines that could test and strengthen a hero's abilities, towers that could map the entire kingdom, weapons that could strike with divine precision. But they had also created the instruments of their own civilization's destruction. The very guardians that were meant to protect Hyrule could be turned against it. The divine beasts that were supposed to ensure victory could become agents of catastrophe. The champions chosen to pilot the divine beasts represented the finest heroes of their respective peoples, warriors and leaders, who embodied the highest ideals of their cultures. Mipha, the Zora princess, whose healing abilities were matched only by her gentle wisdom and her quiet love for Link. Daruk, the Goron champion, whose strength was exceeded only by his loyalty and his infectious optimism about their chances of victory. Urbosa, the Gerudo chief, whose mastery of lightning was matched by her fierce protectiveness of those she considered family. Revali, the Rito archer, whose pride and competitiveness masked a deep commitment to proving that any challenge could be overcome through skill and determination. Each champion brought not just their own abilities to the alliance, but the full support and resources of their people. The Zora had pledged their mastery of water and their knowledge of ancient healing arts. The Gorons offered their unmatched strength and their expertise with fire and stone. The Gerudo contributed their desert survival skills and their understanding of combat tactics refined through generations of warrior culture. The Rito provided their command of the skies and their ability to see approaching threats from vast distances. When Calamity Ganon emerged from his 10,000-year slumber, he appeared not as the man corrupted by power that previous Links had faced, but as pure malice given form and terrible purpose. This was not Ganondorf seeking dominion or revenge. This was hatred itself, distilled into a force of destruction that existed only to consume and corrupt everything it touched. The Calamity had learned from previous defeats, had evolved beyond the limitations of physical form into something that could inhabit and corrupt the very technology that had been created to defeat it. The carefully laid plans of a century crumbled in a matter of hours as the Sheikah technology turned against its creators. The divine beasts, meant to strike decisive blows against the calamity, became prisons for their pilots as malice seeped into their systems and corrupted their functions. The guardians that were supposed to protect Hyrule Castle became an army of destruction that swept across the land, their targeting systems reprogrammed to identify all life as threats to be eliminated. Link's fall at Fort Hateno represented more than just the defeat of a single hero. It was the moment when the old understanding of heroism proved inadequate to meet the challenges of a new age. Despite all his training, all his preparation, all the ancient wisdom and modern technology at his disposal, he could not prevent the catastrophe that befell the kingdom. His last memory before the healing sleep was of Princess Zelda, finally awakening her sealing power in the moment of his apparent death, holding back the calamity through sheer force of will and a love so pure that it could channel divine energy. The image that would haunt him when he finally awakened was of Zelda standing alone against the manifestation of ultimate evil, her power finally awakened not through prayer or ritual, but through the desperate need to protect someone she loved more than her own life. Her sealing of the calamity was not a clean victory, but a desperate holding action, a sacrifice that condemned her to a century of solitary struggle, while the kingdom she protected crumbled around her. 100 years passed while Link slept in the Shrine of Resurrection, his body slowly healing from wounds that should have been fatal, his memories scattered and fragmented by the trauma of defeat and the mystical processes that preserved his life. Hyrule crumbled into a beautiful ruin during this time, nature reclaiming the monuments to civilization with patient persistence, transforming the ordered kingdom into a wild landscape where danger and wonder existed side by side. The wilderness that Hyrule had become was both more dangerous and more alive than the civilized kingdom that had preceded it. Ancient ruins told stories of a lost golden age, but they also provided shelter and resources for the scattered survivors who had learned to live with the constant threat of guardians and monsters. The people who remained had developed new ways of life that blended old wisdom with desperate innovation, creating communities that could survive in a world where the old certainties no longer applied. When Link awakened in the Shrine of Resurrection, he faced a challenge unique among all his incarnations. He had to rediscover not just his destiny, but himself. His memories were scattered like pieces of a shattered mirror, each fragment sharp and clear, but disconnected from the larger picture of who he had been and what he had fought to protect. His very identity was a puzzle to be solved one recovered memory at a time, each piece revealing something about the hero he had been, while raising new questions about the hero he would become. The Great Plateau, where Link began his new awakening, served as both a training ground and a microcosm of what Hyrule had become. Here, in the shadow of the Temple of Time, where so many previous heroes had begun their journeys, he learned the fundamental skills he would need to survive. In a world that no longer provided the support systems that heroes had traditionally relied upon. There were no friendly villagers to offer supplies, no wise mentors to provide guidance, no clear path to follow toward his ultimate destination. Instead, Link had to become entirely self-sufficient, learning to hunt for food, craft his own equipment, read the weather patterns, and navigate by the stars. The shrines scattered across the land, over 100 trials left by the ancient Sheikah, tested not just his problem-solving abilities, but his determination to grow stronger, despite having lost everything that had once defined him. Each shrine represented a different aspect of the challenges he would face, from simple puzzles that tested his reasoning to complex trials that demanded perfect coordination between mind and body. The hero of the Wild's journey was one of literal and metaphorical reconstruction, as he slowly rebuilt both his understanding of the world and his sense of purpose within it. As he explored the vast wilderness that Hyrule had become, he encountered the remnants of the civilization he had failed to protect. Ruined towns where grass grew through broken cobblestones, abandoned outposts where rust-eaten weapons spoke of desperate last stands, monuments to heroes and kings whose names were remembered only in crumbling inscriptions. But he also discovered that life had found ways to persist and even flourish in the aftermath of catastrophe. The surviving settlements, Hateno Village, Lurelin Village, the various stables that served as waypoints for travelers, had developed their own cultures and traditions, their own ways of finding joy and meaning in a world that had been stripped of its former glory. The people he met had stories of their own, lives that had been shaped by the calamity but not defined by it, hopes and dreams that extended beyond mere survival. This link demonstrated heroism through adaptation and perseverance rather than through adherence to traditional forms and expectations. The wild Hyrule required him to think creatively about every challenge, to find multiple solutions to every problem, to adapt his approach based on available resources rather than relying on predetermined tools and methods. His ability to use any object as a weapon, to climb any surface that offered the slightest handhold, to find edible plants and useful materials in the most unlikely places, showed that heroism could be infinitely flexible while remaining fundamentally true to its core principles. The divine beasts became both dungeons to conquer and relationships to heal. Massive mechanical temples that had been corrupted by malice but still contained the spirits of their original pilots. Each liberation required not just combat skill and puzzle-solving ability, but emotional intelligence and the capacity to understand and honor the sacrifices that had been made a century earlier. The champions had died defending their divine beasts, but their spirits remained, trapped in a state of eternal struggle against the corruption that had consumed their mechanical partners. Mipha's gentle spirit carried both love and sorrow, her healing grace dimmed but not extinguished by a century of imprisonment. Her relationship with Link had been complex even before the calamity, a love that she had never fully expressed, a hope for a future that had been destroyed before it could be realized. Freeing her spirit required Link to confront not just the mechanical challenges of Vah Ruta, but the emotional reality of what his survival had cost those who had died believing in him. Daruk's boisterous enthusiasm remained intact despite his spiritual imprisonment, his faith in Link's eventual return, never wavering, even as decades passed without any sign of the hero's awakening. The liberation of Vah Rudania became a celebration of friendship that transcended death, a proof that some bonds could survive even the most complete destruction. Daruk's protection had saved Link's life during the calamity, and his continued faith provided the emotional foundation that Link needed to believe in his own eventual victory. Urbosa's fierce spirit burned with protective fury that had only intensified during her century of captivity. Her connection to Princess Zelda added another layer of complexity to her liberation. She had failed to protect the young woman she had considered a daughter, and her rage at this failure had become a weapon against the corruption that held her captive. Freeing Va Naboris required Link to channel and redirect this fury, to help Urbosa find peace through the knowledge that her sacrifice had meaning. Rivali's pride had been wounded by the Calamity's victory, his confidence shattered by the realization that his skills had proven inadequate to the task. His spirit struggled with the knowledge that he had failed, not just himself, but everyone who had depended on him. The liberation of Va Medo became an act of redemption for both Rivali and Link, a chance for the archer to prove that his abilities could contribute to victory even in death, and for Link to acknowledge the value of skills and perspectives different from his own. The recovered memories that gradually returned to Link throughout his journey painted a picture of the man he had been, skilled and dedicated, but also burdened by expectations and struggling with the weight of destiny. These memories revealed that his relationship with Princess Zelda had not always been smooth, that his stoic dedication to duty had sometimes made it difficult for her to connect with him as a person, rather than as a symbol of her own perceived failures. The memory of their final conversation before the Calamity's emergence showed two young people struggling with impossible pressure, each trying to support the other while battling their own fears and doubts. Zelda's scientific curiosity and Link's martial dedication represented different approaches to the same goal, but their differences had sometimes created friction rather than harmony. The tragedy of their situation was that they had only begun to truly understand each other when catastrophe struck and separated them. The final approach to Hyrule Castle revealed the full scope of what the Calamity had wrought upon the kingdom. The once magnificent seat of royal power had become a fortress of malice, its familiar architecture twisted into threatening forms, its halls patrolled by corrupted guardians and creatures of pure hatred. The very air around the castle pulsed with malevolent energy that sought to corrupt anyone who approached, testing not just Link's physical abilities, but his spiritual resistance to the corrupting influence of pure evil. The confrontation with Calamity Ganon showcased the true scope of evil's evolution over the millennia. This was no longer a being driven by recognizable motivations like power or revenge. This was malice itself, hatred distilled into pure destructive force that existed only to consume and destroy everything that lived and grew and loved. The battle required every skill Link had developed, every lesson he had learned, every connection he had forged throughout his journey across the reborn wilderness. Link's victory came not through his own strength alone, but through the combined power of all the relationships he had rebuilt and the sacrifices others had made on his behalf. The divine beasts, freed from corruption and piloted once again by the spirits of their original champions, provided covering fire that weakened the Calamity's defenses. The Master Sword, recharged through trials and purified through Link's own growth, cut through malice that no ordinary weapon could touch. Princess Zelda's century-long struggle had weakened the Calamity's hold on the physical world, allowing Link to strike the decisive blow against an enemy that had once seemed utterly invincible. The moment of Zelda's release from her century-long vigil represented more than just the end of the calamity. It was the restoration of hope to a world that had learned to survive without it. Her emergence from the cocoon of light that had surrounded Hyrule Castle was like dawn breaking after the longest night, a reminder that some sacrifices were so pure that they could sustain miracles. The reunion between Link and Zelda was wordless but profound, a meeting between two people who had been transformed by their shared ordeal into something deeper than they had been before. Yet victory brought new questions and new challenges that would be explored in the sequel adventure that followed. In Tears of the Kingdom, Link and Zelda discovered that their struggle against the calamity was part of a much larger cycle of conflict that stretched back to the very foundations of Hyrule itself. The evil they had faced wasn't just Calamity Ganon, but the original form of the Demon King, Ganondorf himself, who had been sealed beneath Hyrule Castle for 10,000 years, his malice slowly corrupting the land from below, while his consciousness plotted revenge against a kingdom that had dared to oppose him. The underground depths, revealed during their exploration of the caverns beneath the castle, showed that Hyrule existed in more dimensions than anyone had realized. The kingdom that Link had fought to protect was only the surface layer of a much more complex reality that included not just the familiar landscape, but the sky islands that floated in the heavens above, and the vast underground realm that stretched through the darkness below. Each level of this three-dimensional world contained its own secrets, its own challenges, and its own contributions to the larger story of Hyrule's history and destiny. Zelda's sacrifice in Tears of the Kingdom, allowing herself to be transformed into the Light Dragon in order to empower the Master Sword across thousands of years, represented the ultimate expression of the love and dedication that had defined her character throughout both adventures. Her willingness to give up her human form, to exist as a divine being with no memory of her mortal life, showed that heroism could take forms that went beyond traditional concepts of courage and strength. Link's quest to reach her, to find a way to restore her humanity without losing her divine power, demonstrated that love could be the greatest heroic motivation of all. His journey through the Sky Islands and the depths, his mastery of the Zonai abilities that allowed him to create solutions rather than simply find them, his patient gathering of the dragon tears that contained fragments of her memories. All of these showed that heroism in the modern age meant being willing to innovate and adapt while never losing sight of what truly mattered. The abilities that Link gained in Tears of the Kingdom, Fuse, Ultra Hand, Ascend, and Recall, represented a new kind of heroic power that perfectly suited the challenges of a rapidly changing world. Rather than simply wielding tools created by others, he could create his own solutions, build his own vehicles, craft his own weapons from the materials that the world provided. This evolution of heroic capability showed that the spirit of the hero was infinitely adaptable, capable of growing and changing to meet new challenges, while maintaining the essential qualities that made heroism meaningful. The Zonai technology that Link discovered and mastered represented the fusion of ancient wisdom and modern innovation that defined this new era of heroism. The devices he found in the Sky Islands and depths could be combined in countless ways, limited only by his imagination and creativity. This freedom to experiment and innovate reflected a broader truth about heroism, that the greatest heroes were not those who followed predetermined paths, but those who found new ways to serve others and protect what they loved. When he finally faced the Demon King Ganondorf in his true form, Link's victory came through the combination of everything he had learned and built and created throughout his extended adventure. His weapons were forged from the materials of Hyrule itself, fused with creature parts and Zonai devices to create tools that no previous hero could have imagined. His vehicles were products of his own ingenuity, combinations of ancient technology and creative problem-solving that allowed him to approach challenges from entirely new angles. The final battle against Ganondorf represented not just the culmination of Link's personal journey, but the ultimate test of everything that heroism had become in the modern age. This was not a fight between two individuals, but a confrontation between two different philosophies of power. Ganondorf's belief that strength meant domination and control, and Link's understanding that true strength came from connection, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. Link's ultimate victory was made possible not just by his own abilities, but by the love and trust of Princess Zelda, who had given everything to ensure that he would have the tools he needed to succeed. Her transformation back from dragon to human form represented the final proof that some bonds are strong enough to survive any transformation, that love can endure across thousands of years and transcend the boundaries between mortal and divine. The hero of the wild and his princess represented perhaps the most complete evolution of the Link and Zelda archetypes, heroes who embodied both tradition and innovation, who honored the past while embracing the future, who understood that true strength came not from following predetermined destinies, but from making conscious choices moment by moment, day by day, in service of protecting the world and the people they loved. Their story showed that heroism was not a fixed concept, but a living ideal that could grow and adapt to meet any challenge while never losing sight of its essential purpose: to stand as a light against the darkness, to choose hope over despair, and to prove that love was stronger than hatred, creation more powerful than destruction, and courage more enduring than fear. The year 2024 brought something unprecedented to the Legend of Zelda series, a game where Princess Zelda herself stepped into the role of the hero, fundamentally transforming our understanding of what courage could accomplish and who could carry the legendary burden of protecting Hyrule. In Echoes of Wisdom, the traditional relationship between the princess and her chosen knight was beautifully inverted, revealing new depths to both characters, and demonstrating that the very nature of heroism was far more flexible and inclusive than centuries of legend had suggested. This adventure began with what seemed like the most familiar scenario imaginable. Link, wielding his full power and complete arsenal, infiltrated the dark Suthorn ruins to rescue Princess Zelda from Ganon's terrible clutches. The opening sequence showcased Link at his absolute pinnacle of heroic achievement, 20 hearts pulsing with life force, a complete selection of weapons at his disposal, moving with the fluid grace and deadly precision that fans had come to expect from Hyrule's most legendary champion. His infiltration of the ruins was a masterclass in heroic competence. Each enemy fallen with surgical efficiency, each obstacle overcome with practiced ease. His battle with Ganon appeared to follow the traditional script that had played out across countless adventures, the eternal struggle between good and evil, reaching its familiar crescendo. The Dark Lord's roars echoed through the ancient stone chambers as Link's blade found its mark again and again, each strike powered by courage, refined through trial and hardship, each movement informed by skills honed through years of dedicated training. Victory seemed assured, the princess's rescue imminent, the kingdom's salvation at hand through the familiar formula of heroic intervention and martial prowess. But in a moment that redefined the entire franchise and challenged every assumption about how these stories were supposed to unfold, victory became catastrophe in the space of a single heartbeat. As Ganon fell, his final defeat triggered something far more dangerous than any individual villain's scheme. Mysterious purple rifts tore through reality itself like wounds in the fabric of existence, creating passages to a realm where the normal laws of space and time held no meaning. Link, in his final heroic act, demonstrated the instinctive selflessness that had always defined his character across every incarnation and timeline. Even as the rift consumed him, even as his own existence was being torn away from the world he had dedicated his life to protecting, he fired an arrow with perfect accuracy that cracked Zelda's crystal prison. In those crucial seconds between his triumph over Ganon and his disappearance into the void, he ensured that his sacrifice would have meaning, that the princess he had died to save would have the chance to escape and continue the fight that he could no longer wage. The image of Link vanishing into the purple void while his arrow struck true would become seared into Zelda's memory, a reminder of the ultimate price that heroism could demand and the ultimate trust that could exist between two people who shared a destiny larger than either of their individual lives. His green cap and gear left behind in the ruins became both memorial and inheritance, symbols of a heroic legacy that would need to be carried forward by someone else. The Link of Echoes of Wisdom, though appearing only briefly as a playable character, represented something unique among his incarnations. This was Link at his absolute pinnacle. Not a young boy growing into heroism or a fallen warrior recovering his strength, but the legendary hero at full power making the ultimate sacrifice. His brief appearance established the stakes of what would follow and demonstrated that even the most accomplished heroes could face challenges that transcended individual capability. Zelda's awakening in the ruins marked the beginning of the most significant role reversal in the series' history, a transformation that would challenge every assumption about gender, power, and destiny that had been embedded in the franchise since its inception. Escaping from the Soothorn ruins, wearing Link's abandoned hood, she found herself in a Hyrule where mysterious rifts were swallowing people and places into the still world, a timeless void where everything captured existed in eternal stasis, frozen between existence and non-existence. The kingdom's crisis demanded a hero, but the hero was gone, consumed by the very victory that was supposed to ensure Hyrule's safety. The traditional solution to the eternal problem of evil's return had failed not through inadequacy, but through the emergence of a threat that existed beyond the conventional understanding of good and evil. The rifts represented something more fundamental than corruption or conquest. They were manifestations of entropy itself, the universe's tendency toward dissolution and emptiness. Enter Tri, a mysterious fairy-like being whose arrival provided Zelda with the Tri-Rod, a magical artifact that would redefine the very concept of heroic power in the Zelda universe. Unlike Link's traditional arsenal of swords, shields, and raw courage, Zelda's strength lay in wisdom made manifest, the ability to create echoes of objects and creatures she encountered, then use these replicas to solve problems in ways that no previous hero had ever attempted or even imagined. The Echoes system represented far more than a novel gameplay mechanic. It was a philosophical statement about the nature of heroism itself, and a demonstration that wisdom could be as powerful as courage when properly applied. Where Link typically overcame obstacles through strength and skill, through the direct application of force guided by righteous purpose, Zelda succeeded through understanding and innovation, through careful observation of how the world worked and creative application of that knowledge to achieve her goals. Every challenge became an opportunity for creative problem-solving, rather than direct confrontation, a chance to demonstrate that there were as many solutions to any given problem as there were ways of understanding that problem. She could create echoes of water blocks to reach new heights, transforming the simple act of climbing into an exercise in hydraulic engineering. She could construct bridges from beds, showing that any object could serve multiple purposes when viewed with sufficient imagination. She could generate armies of friendly monsters to fight alongside her, proving that even enemies could become allies when approached with wisdom and compassion. This wasn't merely a different approach to familiar challenges. It was a fundamental reimagining of what heroism could accomplish when freed from traditional constraints and expectations. Zelda's echo abilities allowed players to approach the same problem from dozens of different angles, demonstrating that there was rarely just one correct way to be a hero, that creativity and adaptability were as valuable as strength and determination. The philosophical implications of the Echo system extended far beyond its practical applications in puzzle solving and combat. By creating replicas of objects and creatures, Zelda was essentially demonstrating her understanding of their essential nature, her ability to perceive and reproduce the fundamental patterns that made each thing what it was. This represented a form of wisdom that went beyond mere knowledge to encompass true comprehension of the interconnected nature of all existence. When Zelda did need to engage in direct combat, she could temporarily access the sword fighter form, a magical transformation that gave her Link's appearance, abilities, and weapons for brief periods. This mechanic served multiple narrative purposes beyond its immediate tactical utility. It honored Link's absent heroism by allowing his techniques and knowledge to continue protecting Hyrule even after his physical disappearance. It showed that Zelda was capable of traditional heroic action when circumstances absolutely required it, dispelling any notion that her preference for wisdom-based solutions came from inability rather than choice. Most importantly, the sword fighter form demonstrated that the boundary between warrior princess and wise ruler was more fluid than the series had previously explored, that the same person could embody multiple forms of heroism, depending on what the situation demanded. Zelda's ability to channel Link's fighting style when necessary proved that she had absorbed and understood his approach to heroism, even while developing her own distinctly different methods. The story's primary antagonist, Null, represented an entity of pure entropy, the primordial desire to return everything to nothingness, to void, to the empty silence that existed before creation began. This enemy couldn't be defeated through force alone, because force was itself a form of creation, an imposition of order upon chaos that Null's very nature rejected and sought to dissolve. Traditional heroic methods were not just inadequate against such a foe. They were conceptually inappropriate, like trying to fight darkness by punching it. Zelda's approach to understanding and ultimately defeating Null required a form of wisdom that went beyond anything previously demonstrated in the series. She had to comprehend not just what Null was, but what it represented, the inevitable endpoint of all existence, the final entropy that would claim every star, every world, every story ever told. Her victory came not through destroying this force, but through demonstrating that creation and connection were more fundamental than dissolution and isolation. The revelation that Null had been corrupting the world from within for ages, working through the rifts to gradually drain reality of its substance and meaning, showed that some evils required patience and understanding to defeat rather than sword and sorcery. This was not a villain with comprehensible motivations that could be reasoned with or redirected. This was a force of nature that could only be opposed through the deliberate choice to create, to connect, to affirm existence in the face of non-existence. Zelda's relationship with the people of Hyrule throughout her adventure revealed another dimension of her heroism that distinguished her approach from Link's traditional methods. Initially blamed for the rifts that were consuming the kingdom, a logical but incorrect assumption based on the timing of her escape from the ruins, she had to prove her worth not through displays of power, but through acts of service and protection that demonstrated her genuine care for the people she sought to save. Her interactions with various citizens showed that heroism often manifested in small kindnesses rather than grand gestures, in the patient work of helping individuals solve their problems rather than the dramatic confrontation with ultimate evil. She helped shopkeepers recover their lost goods, assisted farmers with their crops, reunited families separated by the chaos of the rifts, and gradually built a network of trust and support that proved more valuable than any weapon. This grassroots approach to heroism reflected Zelda's understanding that true leadership came through service rather than domination, that the strongest foundations for peace were built through the accumulation of countless small acts of kindness rather than through single moments of decisive action. Her journey showed that saving the world often meant saving individuals, one person at a time, one problem at a time, one act of compassion at a time. The game's placement in the Fallen timeline, positioned between Triforce heroes and the original Legend of Zelda, gave it special significance within the larger narrative framework of the series. This Zelda's heroic journey helped shape the kingdom that would eventually need another Link to rise as its champion, demonstrating that the spirit of heroism wasn't exclusive to one gender, one approach, or one individual. Her actions proved that the cycle of heroic reincarnation was more flexible and inclusive than previous games had suggested, that the essential qualities of courage, wisdom, and power could manifest in different people in different ways, depending on what the world needed most. The fact that she succeeded through methods entirely different from Link's traditional approach expanded the definition of what heroism could encompass without diminishing the importance of any particular heroic tradition. The resolution of Echoes of Wisdom, with both Link and Zelda working together to defeat Null, pointed toward a future where heroism might be collaborative rather than solitary, where the traditional roles of protector and protected could be transcended in favor of true partnership. Zelda had proven herself fully capable of saving the kingdom alone, but she chose to share the victory with the hero whose sacrifice had made her journey possible. This partnership reinforced that the greatest heroism often came through cooperation rather than individual action, that the deepest victories were those that honored everyone who had contributed to the struggle rather than glorifying a single champion. Zelda's willingness to restore Link to his rightful place in the story showed that true wisdom included the humility to recognize when shared achievement was more meaningful than personal glory. The Princess Zelda of Echoes of Wisdom established herself as a new kind of hero, one who succeeded not by becoming Link, but by becoming fully herself. Her wisdom-based approach to problem-solving, her ability to create rather than destroy, her talent for bringing out the best in others while handling the worst threats herself, all demonstrated that heroism was far broader and more inclusive than the series had previously shown. Her echo abilities represented more than magical powers. They symbolized the fundamental heroic capacity to understand the world deeply enough to work with it rather than against it, to solve problems through creativity rather than force, to build connections rather than destroy obstacles. This approach to heroism offered a model that could inspire heroes of every kind, showing that courage could take many forms and that wisdom was not a secondary virtue but a primary source of strength. This Link and Zelda, despite their brief, direct interaction, represented the future of the franchise, a recognition that heroism came in many forms, that wisdom and courage were equally valuable, that the legend of Zelda was large enough to encompass heroes of every kind, fighting evil, through every method available to those brave enough to try. Their story proved that the most important heroic quality was not strength or destiny, but the simple willingness to help others when help was needed most. The game's conclusion established that the heroic spirit was not bound by traditional expectations or gender roles, that the same essential courage that had driven every Link throughout history could manifest just as powerfully in Princess Zelda when circumstances called for her to take up the mantle of champion. Her success didn't diminish Link's importance. It expanded the understanding of what heroism could accomplish and who could accomplish it. In demonstrating that wisdom could be as powerful as courage, that creativity could triumph where force might fail, that understanding could overcome where strength might prove inadequate. Zelda's adventure in Echoes of Wisdom added new chapters to the eternal story of good versus evil, while honoring every chapter that had come before. Her legacy would stand alongside all the Links who had carried the burden of heroism, proving that the spirit of the hero was resilient enough to adapt to any form, any gender, any approach, while maintaining its essential commitment to protecting the innocent and standing against the darkness. As we trace the threads connecting each Link across the vast tapestry of time, patterns emerge that reveal the deeper truths about heroism, destiny, and the nature of the spirit that binds these warriors together across millennia. The story of Link is not simply the tale of different individuals sharing a name and a green tunic. It is the chronicle of a single heroic essence manifesting across multiple lifetimes. Each incarnation shaped by the needs of their particular era, while maintaining the core qualities that define true heroism in its purest form. The spirit of the hero, first established by the original champion of Hylia in the era before Skyward Sword, became crystallized and refined through the hero of the sky's trials and victories. When Demise cursed Link and Zelda to an eternal cycle of reincarnation and conflict, he unknowingly created something far more powerful than he intended. Not just a pattern of suffering and struggle, but a guarantee that hope would always return, that courage would always rise to meet despair, that light would always find a way to shine through even the deepest darkness. This curse, intended as the ultimate revenge against those who had dared to oppose the primordial evil, transformed instead into a blessing that would echo through every subsequent age. Each time, darkness threatened to overwhelm the world. Each time evil grew strong enough to challenge the foundations of existence itself, the spirit of the hero would be reborn to meet that challenge. But this reincarnation was not a simple repetition. Each new Link brought their own unique perspective, their own strengths, their own understanding of what courage meant in their particular time and circumstances. Each subsequent Link inherited this spiritual legacy while bringing their own distinct approach to the role of hero, creating a rich tapestry of heroic tradition that grew more complex and nuanced with each passing generation. The hero of the Minish taught that size and age mattered less than heart and determination, that even the smallest person could accomplish great things when motivated by love and guided by wisdom. His adventures showed that heroism often began with simple acts of kindness and grew through patient dedication to helping others. The hero of time demonstrated that true heroism sometimes required sacrifice on a scale that few could comprehend, that the greatest victories could demand the highest personal costs. His willingness to give up his own happiness and recognition for the greater good established the template for heroic sacrifice that would inspire countless future champions. The fact that he made this sacrifice willingly, understanding its full implications, showed that mature heroism meant accepting responsibility even when that responsibility came with unbearable burdens. The hero of Winds proved that legends could be transcended and that new forms of heroism could emerge when old patterns no longer served the world's needs. His joyful approach to adventure, his ability to find wonder in discovery, rather than wait in responsibility, showed that heroism didn't have to be grim and sorrowful to be genuine and effective. His creation of the Master Sword through his own efforts rather than divine appointment proved that heroism could be claimed rather than simply received. The bloodline connections, where they existed, added another crucial layer to this spiritual inheritance that went beyond mere genetics to encompass cultural memory and familial tradition. The hero of Twilight's descent from the hero of time wasn't merely a matter of shared DNA. It was a bridge between timelines, a proof that the spirit of heroism could be passed down through family bonds as well as divine reincarnation. The knowledge and techniques that flowed from ancestor to descendant created continuity that helped preserve essential wisdom while allowing for innovation and adaptation. When the hero of Twilight learned combat techniques from the hero Shade, the spirit of his ancestor who had lingered in the world, to pass on crucial knowledge, it demonstrated that heroism was also about learning from those who had walked the path before. This mentorship across the boundary between life and death showed that the heroic tradition was cumulative, that each link built upon the achievements and lessons of those who had come before, while adding their own unique contributions to the growing legacy. In the adult timeline, the absence of any blood connection to previous heroes proved equally significant in developing the understanding of what heroism could become. The hero of Winds succeeded not because of inherited destiny or ancient bloodlines calling to him from beyond time, but because of chosen courage, the deliberate decision to take up the mantle of heroism when circumstances demanded it. His victory came through personal determination rather than predestined fate, proving that heroism was accessible to anyone willing to pay its price. When he decided to forge the master sword himself rather than wait for divine permission or inherited right, he demonstrated that heroism could be claimed by those bold enough to seize it. His descendant, the hero of Trains, further emphasized this theme by being an ordinary working person who happened to have an extraordinary heart, showing that heroism could emerge from the most humble origins when circumstances called for courage and compassion. The evolution of evil itself played a crucial role in shaping how each Link's heroism manifested across the generations. Early Links faced villains like Vati, a being corrupted by power but still fundamentally humanoid in his motivations and methods, someone who could potentially be reasoned with or redeemed through proper understanding and compassion. The challenges presented by such enemies required heroes who could balance strength with mercy, who understood that victory sometimes meant healing rather than destruction. The hero of Time confronted Ganondorf, a man whose ambitions had grown beyond human scale, but whose nature remained comprehensible within the framework of mortal psychology. This enemy required opposition that combined strength and wisdom, a hero who could fight with full understanding of what he fought against, while never losing sight of what he fought to protect. The battle was not just physical, but philosophical, a contest between different visions of what power should accomplish. Later, Lynx faced increasingly abstract forms of evil. Calamity Ganon represented malice distilled into pure destructive force, evil stripped of personality or comprehensible motivation, and reduced to its essential nature as the enemy of all life and growth. This type of threat demanded heroes who could stand against hatred itself, who could maintain their commitment to protection and creation, even when facing an enemy that existed only to corrupt and destroy. Finally, some Lynx confronted entities like Null, entropy given consciousness and will, the fundamental force that sought to return all existence to the void from which it had emerged. Such enemies required the kind of wisdom that could understand nothingness and still choose somethingness, that could face the ultimate meaninglessness and respond by creating meaning through sheer force of will and dedication to others. The technological evolution of Hyrule also reflected the growth of heroic understanding across the ages, showing how heroism adapted to changing circumstances while maintaining its essential character. Early Lynx wielded simple tools, swords, shields, bows, that reflected a world where heroism was straightforward and evil was relatively clear-cut. These weapons were extensions of the hero's own strength and skill, requiring personal mastery and direct engagement with challenges. The hero of Time's arsenal expanded to include magical items that required wisdom as well as strength to use properly, reflecting a more complex understanding of what heroism entailed. Items like the lens of truth showed that heroes needed to see through deception, while tools like the Song of Time demonstrated that heroism sometimes meant manipulating the very fabric of reality to achieve necessary goals. The hero of Winds commanded technology in the form of his sentient boat, which required cooperation between hero and magical guide rather than simple mastery of tools. This partnership approach to heroism showed that even legendary champions needed allies and advisors, that the greatest heroes were those who could work effectively with others rather than trying to solve every problem through individual effort. The hero of the wild integrated ancient technology with natural ability, showing that heroism could evolve with the times while maintaining its essential character. His use of Sheikah technology, his mastery of cooking and crafting, his ability to adapt any object to serve his needs, all demonstrated that modern heroism required flexibility and innovation as much as traditional virtues like courage and determination. Princess Zelda's emergence as a hero in her own right represented the culmination of this evolutionary process, showing that heroism had finally evolved beyond the need for a single approach or a single type of person. Her echo-based problem-solving demonstrated that wisdom and creativity could be as powerful as strength and courage, that understanding and innovation could accomplish what force alone might fail to achieve. The fact that she succeeded through methods entirely different from traditional heroic approaches didn't diminish the importance of previous heroic traditions. It expanded the definition of what heroism could encompass. Her success proved that the spirit of the hero was adaptable enough to manifest in anyone with the right combination of courage, wisdom, and dedication to serving others, regardless of their gender, background, or preferred methods. The recurring elements throughout the series, the Master Sword, the Triforce, the various races and kingdoms, served as constants that allowed each link's unique nature to shine through, while maintaining continuity with the larger heroic tradition. The Master Sword recognized the spirit of the hero, regardless of the specific individual carrying it, responding to the essential qualities of courage and righteousness, rather than to particular bloodlines or predetermined destinies. The Triforce of courage gravitated toward those who possessed true bravery, whether that bravery was inherited through ancient bloodlines or developed through personal experience and conscious choice. The fact that it could recognize heroism in so many different forms proved that courage itself was more flexible and inclusive than any single definition could encompass. The peoples of Hyrule, Gorons, Zoras, Gerudos, and others maintained their cultural identities across eras while adapting to work with whatever form heroism took in their time. Their consistent willingness to support and assist heroes showed that heroism was not a solitary endeavor, but a community effort, that even the greatest champions succeeded through the support and sacrifice of countless others. Modern developments in the Zelda universe suggest that the pattern of heroic evolution continues to unfold in new and unexpected directions. The enhanced versions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom for the Switch 2, with their improved performance and new features like Zelda Notes, indicate that the hero of the Wild story continues to grow and develop even as new chapters in the larger legend are being written. The upcoming Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment, promises to explore the ancient conflict that shaped the world. The hero of the Wild would eventually inherit, showing how past events continue to influence present challenges. These expansions of the heroic narrative reflect something profound about the nature of legendary stories. They never truly end. They only transform and grow, taking on new dimensions as our understanding of their meaning deepens. These technological and narrative expansions reflect a fundamental truth about the nature of heroic legend. It never truly ends. It only transforms to meet the needs of each new generation. The Link, who once struggled with technical limitations in early gaming systems, is the same Link who now benefits from advanced graphics and seamless performance, showing that the hero remains constant, while the experience of their heroism evolves and improves. The spirit of Link has proven remarkably adaptable across nearly 4 decades of games, maintaining its essential character while expressing itself through increasingly sophisticated and nuanced storytelling. From the simple pixel sprite of the original 1986 game to the complex, emotionally expressive character of recent entries, the core of what makes Link heroic has remained unchanged, while the methods of expressing that heroism have grown infinitely more sophisticated. He has been a child, a teenager, an adult, a wolf, a train conductor, a knight, a ranch hand, a blacksmith's grandson, a princess's champion, and countless other roles and identities. In every incarnation, he has chosen to help others at personal cost, to stand against evil despite fear, to protect the innocent despite danger. This consistency across change demonstrates that heroism isn't about having the right background or the perfect circumstances. It's about making the choice, moment by moment, to put others' welfare before your own comfort. This truth about the nature of heroism extends beyond the fictional realm to offer real inspiration for actual challenges. Every Link has faced moments of doubt, pain, loss, and despair, feelings that are universal to the human experience. What makes them heroes isn't the absence of these difficult emotions, but the decision to act with courage despite them, to continue fighting for what's right, even when victory seems impossible. The pattern of heroic reincarnation in the Zelda universe serves as a metaphor for the way heroic ideals are passed down through generations in the real world. Each person who chooses to stand up for what's right, who helps others in need, who refuses to accept injustice as inevitable, they are carrying forward the same spirit that animates every Link throughout the series. As we look toward the future of the Zelda franchise, the established pattern suggests that heroism will continue to evolve while maintaining its essential nature. New Links will face new challenges with new abilities, but they will do so with the same spirit that has defined every Link since the beginning. The spirit that chooses light over darkness, hope over despair, action over inaction, and love over fear. The upcoming projects and potential new games will undoubtedly introduce fresh perspectives on what heroism can accomplish and how it can manifest in different circumstances. But regardless of what form these new adventures take, they will be built upon the foundation established by every previous Link, the understanding that heroism is not about being perfect or fearless, but about being willing to try, willing to sacrifice, willing to stand up for others when they need someone to stand with them. The legacy of every Link throughout the series lives on not just in the games themselves, but in the inspiration they provide to anyone facing their own challenges, their own moments when courage is required, their own opportunities to choose between self-interest and service to others. The spirit of the hero is not confined to the fantasy realm of Hyrule. It exists wherever people choose to be brave, to be kind, to be helpful, to be the hero that someone else needs them to be. In this way, the legend of Link becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a reminder of the heroic potential that exists within everyone, waiting for the moment when circumstances call for courage and someone decides to answer that call. The green tunic and master sword are symbols, but the real power they represent, the power to choose good over evil, to help rather than harm, to build rather than destroy, is accessible to anyone willing to embrace it. As our journey through time draws to a close, we find ourselves where all great stories ultimately lead, not to an ending, but to an understanding that transcends the boundaries between fiction and reality, between legend and lived experience. The links we've met across these many hours represent more than mere characters in beloved games or figures in fantastical tales. They are embodiments of something fundamental about the human spirit, reflections of our own capacity for growth, sacrifice, and heroism that exists within each of us, waiting for the moment when it might be called upon to serve something greater than ourselves. From the hero of the skies, who forged the very blade that would define heroism for millennia to come, to Princess Zelda herself taking up the mantle of champion in our modern era, each has shown us that courage comes in many forms, each as valid and valuable as any other. The boy who lived among the Kokiri and discovered his true destiny, the young knight who fell defending his princess only to awaken a century later, the engineer who drove trains across New Hyrule while saving kingdoms, the rancher who learned to embrace the twilight between worlds, all carried within them the same essential truth that heroism is not about perfection or the absence of fear, but about the conscious choice to try when trying matters most. These heroes have taught us that courage is not a single moment of glory, but a series of small decisions made day after day, choice after choice, in circumstances both extraordinary and mundane. The hero of the Minish showed us that even the smallest person could accomplish great things when motivated by love and guided by compassion. His adventures reminded us that heroism often begins with simple acts of kindness, helping a neighbor, standing up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves, choosing to care when it would be easier to remain indifferent. The hero of time demonstrated that true heroism sometimes requires sacrifices that go beyond physical danger to encompass the surrender of personal happiness, recognition, and even identity. His willingness to give up his own glory and return to a timeline where his greatest deeds would never be remembered showed us that the highest form of courage is the willingness to do what is right even when no one will ever know or appreciate the sacrifice involved. The hero of Winds taught us that heroism could be joyful rather than grim, that saving the world could be an adventure filled with wonder and discovery, rather than a burden weighted down by destiny and expectation. His approach to challenges with curiosity and optimism, rather than resignation and duty, showed us that there are many ways to serve others, many paths to making a positive difference in the world. The hero of Twilight revealed that heroism sometimes means accepting loneliness and loss as the price of protecting others, that the deepest understanding often cannot be shared with those we serve. His journey between light and shadow taught us that the world is more complex than simple categories of good and evil allow, that true wisdom requires the ability to see multiple perspectives and find balance between competing truths. The hero of the wild embodied adaptation and perseverance, showing us that heroism in the modern age requires the flexibility to create new solutions rather than simply applying old formulas. His ability to turn any object into a tool, to find multiple approaches to every challenge, to rebuild himself and his understanding of the world from scattered fragments, all demonstrated that resilience is perhaps the most essential heroic quality in an ever-changing world. Princess Zelda's emergence as a hero proved that wisdom and creativity could be as powerful as strength and courage, that understanding and innovation could accomplish what force alone might fail to achieve. Her success, through methods entirely different from traditional heroic approaches, expanded our definition of what heroism could encompass, while honoring every tradition that had come before. In the quiet of this moment, as these stories settle into memory like sediment in still water, we carry forward something precious that extends far beyond entertainment or escapism. We carry the understanding that within each of us lies the same potential for courage that we have witnessed in every Link throughout their various adventures. The circumstances may be different, the challenges may seem smaller or larger by comparison, but the essential choice remains the same. Will we stand up when standing up is needed? Will we help when help is required? Will we choose hope when despair seems easier? The green tunic and pointed cap, the master sword and Hylian shield, the various magical items and divine blessings, these are symbols of heroism, but they are not its source. The real power they represent lies not in any external tool or blessing, but in the decision to use whatever abilities we possess in service of others, rather than solely for our own benefit. Every Link began as an ordinary person in extraordinary circumstances, and their heroism emerged from their choices rather than their destinies. This truth offers profound hope in our own lives, in our own challenges, in our own moments when the world seems dark and the problems seem insurmountable. We may not face ancient evils or cosmic threats, but we face injustice, suffering, loneliness, and despair in forms that are no less real for being familiar. The spirit that drove every Link to action, the refusal to accept that things must always be as they are, the determination to make them better even when the odds seem impossible. That same spirit is available to each of us. The legend of Link teaches us that heroism is not about being chosen by destiny or possessing supernatural powers. It is about making the choice to care about others' welfare, to stand against cruelty and indifference, to offer help when help is needed, to speak truth when truth is unwelcome, to persevere when perseverance seems pointless. These choices are available to everyone, in circumstances both dramatic and mundane, in moments both public and private. Every teacher who refuses to give up on a struggling student, every person who stands up to bullying, every individual who volunteers their time to help their community, every citizen who votes and participates in democracy, every friend who listens when listening is what someone needs most. They are all carrying forward the same spirit that animated the hero of the skies when he chose to descend to the surface world to save someone he loved. The challenges we face in our own world, climate change, inequality, political polarization, social isolation, technological disruption, may seem overwhelming when viewed from a distance. But the Links we have met have shown us that even the most impossible challenges can be overcome. When enough people decide to take action, when enough individuals choose to be part of the solution rather than passive observers of the problem. The hero of time faced the collapse of his entire world and found a way to save it through persistence and the willingness to accept help from others. The hero of winds confronted the complete loss of everything his civilization had built and chose to help create something new rather than mourning what was gone. The hero of the wild awakened to a world in ruins and dedicated himself to healing and restoration rather than despair and retreat. Their examples remind us that heroism is often about showing up consistently, rather than performing spectacular deeds, about doing the work that needs to be done even when that work is difficult, unglamorous, or unrecognized. The shrines that the hero of the wild conquered one by one, the small kindnesses that every Link performed for ordinary people, the patient rebuilding of relationships and communities, these everyday acts of heroism are just as important as the dramatic final battles against ultimate evil. The spirit of the hero lives on because it lives within us all, sleeping perhaps during comfortable times, but never truly absent, always ready to awaken when circumstances call for courage and someone decides to answer that call. The green tunic is a symbol, but the heart that chooses to wear it metaphorically, the spirit that decides to stand for others rather than only for oneself, that power belongs to anyone willing to claim it. As we return from this journey through the timelines and adventures of every Link, we carry with us not just memories of entertaining stories, but reminders of our own heroic potential. The next time we encounter injustice, the next time someone needs help, the next time the world seems too dark or the problems too large, we can remember that every legendary hero began with a single step, a single choice, a single moment of deciding that someone had to try, and it might as well be them. The legend of Link endures because it speaks to something eternal in the human experience, the knowledge that we are capable of more than we often believe, that our choices matter more than our circumstances, that love is stronger than hatred, creation more powerful than destruction, and hope more enduring than despair. In a world that often emphasizes division and difference, these stories remind us of what we share: the capacity for courage, the desire for justice, the need for connection, and the power to choose light over darkness in whatever form that choice may take. Sweet dreams, and may your courage never waver. May you remember, in the quiet moments and the difficult ones, in the times of celebration and the times of trial, that the spirit of the hero is not a gift reserved for the chosen few, but a potential that lives within everyone who decides to care about something larger than themselves. The adventure continues not in distant kingdoms or fantastical realms, but in the everyday choices we make, the ordinary moments when we decide to be brave, to be kind, to be helpful, to be the hero that someone else needs us to be. In this way, the legend truly becomes eternal, not trapped in games or stories, but living and breathing in the real world through everyone who chooses to carry it forward. The Master Sword may sleep in its pedestal, but the courage it represents awakens anew in every act of heroism, no matter how small, no matter how humble, no matter how unnoticed by history. The spirit of Link lives on in all of us, waiting for the moment when the world needs heroes to rise once more.